It's the International Soccer Preview. We are Soccerphiles Canada. Welcome to Series 30, looking at the groups and teams of the 2025 CONCACAF Gold Cup. This episode is looking at Group A: Mexico, Costa Rica, Suriname, and Dominican Republic. Here we go! It's the International Soccer Preview by Soccerphiles Canada, Series 30. I'm Kevin.
And I'm Connor. And today we are looking at Group A for the 2025 Gold Cup tournament. This group is made up of Mexico, Costa Rica, Suriname, and Dominican Republic.
Yeah, and just a note on where we're at in our mediacast. Series 21 to 27 dealt with World Cup 2026 qualifying. Series 21, for example, is covering the Asian region, and we actually did preview the preliminary round there. We were hoping to do more previewing for World Cup 2026, but life got busy. How did life get busy for you, Connor?
Yeah, just with the two kids now, so, busy with that. But yes. We still have hopes of covering it, but we'll now have to do it mostly through reviews. So the past, present, and future media cast that we produced in spring 2024 is still relevant. It outlines the World Cup 2026 qualifying procedure in each region, and we will add a link to that media cast in the show notes.
Yeah, so we will come back to World Cup 2026 qualifying and do that after our current focus, which is the 2025 Gold Cup. I've been working on the player podcast there, but this episode is for the groups and teams of Group A. So the tournament begins on June 14th, 2025, and we're producing, as I said, this groups and teams series as well as a player series, two parts for that. The second one when the rosters are released. There's two parts to this, or two sections, I'll say, to this media cast.
Yeah, so we'll give a summary of each team's World and Regional Cup histories. We'll also take a bit of a closer look at their recent history and form, including how they qualified for this tournament.
Right, and then in part two, we'll look at the teams in comparison to each other, looking at their rankings, head-to-head history, and their chances of success. And we'll end with a discussion of their prospects, our predictions, and so on.
All right, well, we should jump into it.
All right, I got a couple of questions for you to whet your appetite here. So which teams would you guess are the oldest in this tournament? Of these four teams,
the oldest in terms of first international game?
Yes.
I would have to think Mexico is pretty old. Suriname might be older than we thought just because of the Dutch connection. Dominican Republic, I know baseball's big there, so maybe they're a little bit later on the scene. So I'm going to go Mexico, Suriname, then Costa Rica, Dominican Republic being the newest.
All right. Well, we won't answer it here. If you look for that or listen for that, if you're on podcast during this media cast, you'll find that out. And maybe a bit easier, Connor. Can you rank the countries in terms of population?
Well, Mexico is clearly the biggest, and I know Suriname is the tiniest. I would think Costa Rica and Dominican Republic might be pretty close, though, but maybe Costa Rica, I would say, is the second biggest.
All right. Well, I think those are smart guesses, but pay attention, I guess, in part one, and we'll be giving you the answer for those things. Oh, it's right away here. The first order of business in part one is a look at the countries. So we'll begin with Mexico.
Sure. So Mexico has a population of 130 million. So, yeah, clearly the biggest in this group. Their first international game was 1923, and then their nickname, El Tree, a reference to the three colors of their flag.
You betcha, El Tree. Let's move on to the second team, Costa Rica.
Right, so Costa Rica in Central America. It's on one of the thin parts between the North and South American continents, and it touches both the Pacific and the Atlantic Oceans. It has a population of 5.3 million. Its first international was 1921, so older than Mexico.
Wow, there's a bit of a surprise there.
Definitely, yeah. And their nickname, you may be familiar, is Los Ticos.
Los Ticos. And I'm surprised there because actually we did this a while ago, and not that long ago. I think in 2020 their population was 4.4 million, so it's gone up almost 20% there.
Wow, growing country.
Mm-hmm. Third country is Suriname.
Yeah, so they're actually located in South America. It's a fairly large chunk of land, though, not in comparison to other South American countries, but big enough. It's sandwiched in between Guyana and Venezuela, and it has a border with northern Brazil as well. And this was a colony of the Dutch, and it was granted independence in 1975.
Yeah, and that's pretty significant because a lot of their players are kind of even born in the Netherlands and have some attachment to Suriname, but basically play their club soccer in Netherlands. So they really don't come back for friendlies, just for kind of major competitions. There, we'll see that in the player podcast. It's more obvious.
It is a tiny country in population, just 600,000 people, so fewer than a million, so quite small. And their first international game is 1915.
There we go. So who would have guessed that Suriname? Actually, you made a smart guess, thinking they were older than I think a lot of people would have, but older than Mexico and Costa Rica. Mexico in last place right now.
Wow.
All right. Last country is Dominican Republic.
All right. So as you can see on our map there, it kind of lies to the southwest of Florida. There's also Cuba and Bahamas in between. And Dominican Republic shares a fairly large island, and it operates, there's a line down the middle of it, and it operates the east side. I'm getting my direction confused. It's the west side of that island is Haiti, and to the east is Dominican Republic. And it's about 2/3 of the island, so it's the larger part. Yeah, it's not a large country, but its population is 11.5 million. So actually double that of Costa Rica.
There we go. That's a bit of a surprise to me too.
Yeah. And their first international game was 1949. So the newest of the four countries.
Yes, they are quite new. Actually joined FIFA in 1958 there. So, yes, Dominican Republic, the newest of the teams. And we'll do a little comparison here of the populations just to give a visual impression if you're watching YouTube. Do you want to take us through that, Con? I'm going to try to make the flags represent the size of the country.
All right, so Mexico is far and away the largest, 130 million people.
Okay, I'm going to make a pretty big flag there, as big as I can make. Okay.
Yeah. Costa Rica is 5.3 million. So, yeah, considerably smaller, obviously, than Mexico. It's always interesting looking at populations because you kind of expect population to be maybe a little bit relative of success, but throughout its history, Costa Rica obviously performs well compared to some much bigger countries in the region.
Yeah, really, given their success, you would think that they were one of the biggest countries in the region, but half the size of Dominican Republic even.
Yeah, I'll come to them next actually. They're about twice the size of Costa Rica, as you mentioned, but at 11.5 million, still less than a tenth of the population of Mexico.
All right. And even Haiti on the same island has actually been more successful than Dominican Republic there.
Yeah. And then Suriname, the tiny country, just 600,000 people. That might be, a neighborhood in Mexico City, basically.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, there we go. The visuals on the YouTube trying to represent their sizes. And then in terms of age, we have Suriname as the oldest, Costa Rica next, Mexico next, and then Dominican Republic. So a bit of a surprise there, hey?
Indeed.
All right, let's move on to the teams. And we begin with Mexico. I'm just going to kind of try to make the graphics. They're very small for this one because we just start with an overview of the team's participation and strength. So basically, if you're looking at YouTube and you see green, that means they made a tournament. If you see red, that means they didn't. And blue basically means knocked out in the group stage for the visual. Do you want to talk us through their participation and achievements?
Yeah, so Mexico is a senior team in the world, having participated in every World Cup since 1930, except for 1938 when they withdrew and 1990 when they were disqualified. They participated from the beginning of the Regional Cup, but did not enter in 1985 and then were banned in 1989. So reaching the World Cup is no great achievement for El Tri. Apart from the withdrawal in 1938 and the disqualification in 1990, they've only failed to reach the World Cup 3 times. This was in 1934, 1974, and 1982. Their best finish in the Cup is the quarterfinals, both times they hosted in 1970 and 1986. In regional competition, they've won about half the tournaments.
All right, I hate to put you on the spot here, but it's quiz time. What teams made it in 1974 and 1982? Do you know?
I know Canada took the spot in 1982. Is that correct?
Canada, I was thinking El Salvador. I think maybe both of them did.
Okay. And then 1974, I'm not sure. Haiti?
Yeah, what did you say?
Haiti?
Well done, very great. Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot there, but your answers were great. Okay, let's go to zoom in a little bit and look at the World Cup, just in overview here.
Sure. So Mexico regularly qualifies for the World Cup. As mentioned above, they were disqualified in 1990. The reason being that they fielded overage players for a youth tournament, actually forging birth certificates of certain players. In the early years, they were invariably knocked out at the group stage, but they reached the quarterfinal in 1970 and then again in 1986, aided by being the host in both cases. In between that, they had their worst spell, failing to qualify twice and getting knocked out at the group stage in 1978. After being disqualified in 1990, they both reached and have been stopped at the round of 16 in 1994 and in every cup after. This amazing consistency lasting through 7 World Cups was finally broken in 2022, though broken as they knocked out in the group stage, unfortunately for them.
Right, and we'll take a closer look at that most recent World Cup tournament. Meanwhile, we'll move on to an overview of their regional cup history.
So Mexico has always been a power in the regional cup from its start in 1963, and they've won the title 12 out of 27 times. Though always near the top, they did not win the region as much as might be expected, having done so only 3 in 11 times until 1993. Costa Rica also had 3 regional titles in that period, but was not really a rival, having never reached the World Cup. There was no main rival until 1990 when the USA became a force, winning the first Gold Cup in 1991 when the title was changed from CONCACAF Championship. Those two have ruled the region since, winning every Gold Cup between them except for 2000 when who took the prize?
Canada! And I got to correct a mistake we made. I think Canada made the World Cup in 1986 rather than 82.
Right, so it was El Salvador, as you had mentioned.
Yeah, anyway, Canada in 2000.
All right. In the 1990s, Mexico dominated with 3 straight titles from 1993 to 1998. They won only 1 of the 5 cups after that, a relatively weak period where they only reached the quarterfinals in 3 of 5 editions. But from 2009, they've won 5 of the 8 Gold Cups, so remain the top team in the region, and their fans expecting nothing less.
Oh, that's true, hey? Yes, they've been pretty good there, winning the last cup, and we'll take a look at that last cup in the recent tournaments. But meanwhile, we will actually move on. We'll skip the discussion of recent form because the recent history will cover that. So our recent history begins with the basically the last tournament in every competition. So we're going to look at the Gold Cup 2022 campaign here.
Yeah, so Mexico for the 2022 World Cup was one of 5 teams that received a bye to the final round in qualification. Kind of a controversial system, but that took them to an 8-team round robin. And there Mexico finished second, tied for first place with Canada, but actually behind them on goal difference. They were pretty good. They lost 2 games. Those were both on the road to the USA and Canada. And they were good at home, but not imperious, as they actually dropped points in 3 of their 7 home games.
Yeah. So a good campaign there for Canada winning the group. Mexico and USA, of course, the usual strongest teams. And let's look at how they did in the tournament itself, the first time they didn't reach the round of 16 recently.
That's right. It started with a draw against Poland, and then they lost to eventual winners Argentina 2-0. And they won their final game against Saudi Arabia 2-1. So they finished with 4 points, but that was tied on points with Poland, and they went out on goal difference. They had a -1 goal difference, while Poland had a goal difference of 0.
Yeah, so a late goal to Saudi Arabia preventing them from continuing their record. They might meet Saudi Arabia in the final rounds here, so we'll be able to exact revenge. Okay, and just a quick note on 2026 World Cup qualifying. Mexico hasn't played any games, but qualification has begun. Once again, they kind of receive a bye to the later rounds. But the first set of games were played in June of 2024 among the, we'll say, the weaker teams. And the second set is in June of 2025. So we'll be looking forward to that. Again, Mexico won't be playing until well, they qualify automatically, so they won't be playing any qualifying games. So let's look at that Gold Cup in 2023, the last Gold Cup they played in.
Yeah, so just ever so quickly, they qualified through the 2022-23 Nations League by winning their League A group ahead of Jamaica and Suriname. In the tournament, they won their first 2 group games against Honduras and Haiti, but then lost their third game against Qatar, kind of academic, as they had already secured first place. And then in the group stage, as we know, they won the tournament, so they cruised through the group stage actually without conceding a goal, beating first Costa Rica, then Jamaica, and then Panama in the final. But do you want to talk about that final match against Panama?
I didn't. I wasn't prepared for that question. I didn't have anything to say. Did you have something specific to say?
You may recall that it was actually 0-0 between Mexico and Panama until late on in the game. It was the 88th minute when actually a substitute for Mexico came on to score a late winning goal. So it was actually quite close. There's been a lot of Mexico-USA finals, but Panama ran them close in the final.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you took me by surprise there, but it is evidence of Mexico not always having their way with things. Pretty close with Panama there. We saw 2 draws with Jamaica in the qualifying there, and we're going to see some kind of shudders going forward. So Mexico, the strongest team in the region, but not necessarily winning all of their games. Okay, the next one we look at is actually the Copa America in 2024.
Yeah, so for qualifying, they had a 2-legged matchup against Honduras, and actually
that was actually the quarterfinals of the 2023-24 Nations League.
Oh, right.
The 2024, 2023-24.
Correct. Yes, and that was used to double as qualification for Copa America.
That's it.
Yeah. So Mexico got drawn against Honduras, and they lost 2-0 in Honduras in their opener, putting them on the brink of missing really a major tournament. They recovered, however, to win their home leg 2-0. But the second goal, which tied the game on aggregate, was scored 11 minutes into extra time. Can you believe that?
Can't get much closer than that.
Yeah, and that forced a penalty shootout in which Mexico was victorious.
Oh, wow. Well, if they had lost, they would have gone to a playoff and perhaps won that. But a good showing by Honduras there.
Yeah. So how did they do in the tournament? They met CONCACAF team Jamaica, which they beat 1-0 in their opener game. They then met two South American sides, losing to Venezuela and then tying 0-0 with Ecuador. And actually, very similar to the World Cup, they finished with 4 points, but third in the group on goal difference, and failed to advance from the group stage.
Yeah, and they've generally done quite well in the Copa America. They used to be invited to it, and honestly, they couldn't have had a much easier group here. Venezuela and Ecuador notoriously weak in the Copa America. Venezuela, though, were impressive in this particular campaign, but I'm sure the fans are pretty disappointed with this.
Yeah, they were seeded and got, I think, quite a favorable draw. You look at those teams, and yeah, they would expect to probably win the group. So to finish third, it was a very disappointing showing, but perhaps foreshadowed by their qualification.
Yes, true. Okay, well, the next thing we're going to look at is the most recent Nations League campaign.
All right. So they had a quarterfinal match against Honduras. Once again, they lost the away leg 2-0, but once again recovered, this time winning 4-0. So they advanced on aggregate, not needing penalties. And then in the final four, they met first Canada in the semifinals, who they beat 2-0, and then met Panama again, as they did in the Gold Cup, meeting them in the Nations League final, Panama having beaten the United States to get there. And once again, it was late drama in Mexico's favor. A 92nd minute winner secured a 2-1 victory and gave Mexico their first Nations League crown.
There we go. Oh, is that the first Nations League crown? Wow. Yeah, so Raul Jimenez, if you recall, kind of coming back as the hero of both of those games, really.
Correct, yeah, both of them.
Yeah. All right, so Mexico champions not only of the Gold Cup, but champions of the Nations League now, looking good going into it. And we'll just briefly note that their qualification for this Gold Cup was that 2024-25 Nations League quarterfinal with Honduras. So, as we said, Honduras won 2-0 at home, but then lost 4-0 away. Mexico going on to automatic qualification, and Honduras having to play a playoff, which they won. So both of them in the cup. Okay, that is it for Mexico. Ready to move on to Costa Rica?
Yes.
All right. So we'll begin with a look at Costa Rica in terms of overall participation and strength, the kind of the broadest view that we'll give of them.
Yeah, so Costa Rica is a far more senior team than most people realize, first entering the World Cup way back in 1938. They withdrew there, though, and their entry was not accepted again until 1954. So they began competing for the World Cup in 1958 and have participated regularly ever since. They competed in the very first regional competition in 1963 and participated consistently, except for one withdrawal in 1967. As a small country of 5.3 million, they have a pretty impressive record, which is kind of what we mentioned at the top of the show.
Yeah.
They first reached their World Cup in 1990, and from 2002 they have been regular qualifiers, with the exception of 2010. 2014 is their best result. That was a quarterfinal finish and a memorable campaign that was for them.
Right, what a group they came out of, a group of death. Do you remember the teams that were with them?
I think it was it Italy and England?
Italy and England and...
Uruguay, maybe?
Yes, of course, Uruguay. So what a tough group that was, and they finished on top.
Yeah. In regional play, they won the CONCACAF Championship in its first edition in 1963 and have 3 titles in all. The last, though, was in 1989, the last competition before it became the Gold Cup. Second place in 2002 is their best result in the newer competition.
All right, so that's just a broad view. We'll get a bit more specific with a World Cup overview here.
So it took a long time for Costa Rica to reach the World Cup, despite the relatively easy passage the region provides. Even Mexico sometimes faltered to make room for others. They came close in their first 3 entries from 1958 to 66, but not again until 1990, their regional strength roughly paralleling that. They finally made it in 1990 and there got past the group stage for their second best finish in a World Cup. That, together with their last regional title in 1989, seemed a peak year, but they did not qualify for the next 2. From 2002, however, they began qualifying regularly, and in World Cup qualification at least, seemed the 3rd or 4th strongest team in the region. This faltered when they missed the Cup in 2010, but 2014 not only saw their return, but their best World Cup result ever in reaching the quarterfinals. They reached the following 2 Cups, 2018 and 2022, but were knocked out at the group stage in both.
Right, so fairly consistent qualifiers this century. Let's see if their regional cup kind of matches that.
So as we said, they've won the regional cup 3 times. That includes the first edition in 1963 and also in 1969, a strong period where they finished in the top 3 in 4 of the first 5 editions. The other one was, of course, their withdrawal in 1967. So a very good start.
Mm-hmm.
Their weak period, though, was very weak, and they failed to even qualify for the regional cup from 1973 to 81. But they regained strength here sooner than in World Cup play by coming in the top 4 from 1985 to 1993 and winning their 3rd title in that period in 1989. After a weak spell in the late 90s, which tracks with their World Cup record, they've passed the group stage every time since 2000, with a 2nd place finish in 2002. In recent years, they've reached the semifinals twice in 2009 and 2017. Given their World Cup consistency, though, reaching only the quarterfinals in 8 of the last 10 editions is an underperformance, especially in 2015, where their follow-up to their most successful World Cup performance was what has become their standard quarterfinal finish.
Yeah, so I mean, if you think of the quarterfinals as finishing in the top 8, you know, they should be reaching the semifinals a bit more often, don't you think?
For sure, especially because it's usually 3 or 4 teams from CONCACAF in the World Cup. So in World Cup qualifying, they're in the top 4 basically all the time, but yet they can't seem to do that in this tournament.
Yeah, well put. Okay, well, we are going to do a bit of a summary on Costa Rica before we move on to the recent events. So I'll cover that if you don't mind, Connor.
Yeah.
Yeah, so as we've been talking about on the world stage, that puts them as a team that reaches the World Cup, but doesn't normally pass the first round unless they're at the top of their form. So the wider region here includes Mexico, USA, and Canada, as well as the Caribbean teams. For the most part, Costa Rica has been the 3rd strongest team in the region, although they have recently fallen behind Canada. They've also generally been the strongest team in Central America, but here too, they've recently fallen behind Panama. So that puts them around the 5th strongest team in the region. Though they do remain ahead of the Caribbean teams, Jamaica and Haiti, the strongest ones there. So the recent drop for Costa Rica is in part due to a restructuring that was long overdue. That successful 2014 World Cup team continued to carry them to the World Cup, amazingly sometimes, but it only led them to the top 8 in the Gold Cup tournaments. Even by 2020, it was clear that they were a bit over-reliant on those veterans and in need of rebuilding. So it was delayed, but eventually that rebuilding came, or has come in recent times. So it'll be interesting to see their progress going forward.
Absolutely. It'd be very interesting to see if a new generation can kind of take them to that consistent level where they have been for a long time.
Yeah, so we do talk about that, of course, in the players' media cast for Costa Rica, but we don't focus too much on players here. Let's move on to the team and their recent history, or recent performances, beginning as we did with Mexico with the 2022 World Cup.
Yeah, so they were one of 5 teams, like Mexico, to receive a bye to the 8-team round robin. They had a Jekyll and Hyde campaign. They only won 1 of their first 7 games, but then won 6 of their last 7, and that propelled them up the table. They finished in 4th place, tied actually on points with the United States in 3rd, but an inferior goal difference. So that put them into an intercontinental playoff with the winner of the Oceania region, being New Zealand. Rather than a home and away, due to COVID, there was just 1 game played in the neutral location of Qatar, and Costa Rica won that game 1-0.
Yeah, I think that game was a little controversial in itself. Do you want to talk about that, or me?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, well, actually, Costa Rica got the only goal of the game just 3 minutes in. Otherwise, New Zealand was probably the better team, but a close VAR decision went against New Zealand, especially a goal disallowed for what was deemed a foul in the build-up, and a yellow card changed to a red at 69. So really, Costa Rica really snuck through this cup. As you said, they were in 5th place up until the last 3 games. And it was really their veterans that pulled them through.
Yeah.
Yeah, both in that game and in the game against New Zealand. I think it was Joel Campbell who got the winner there.
Yeah, you're right.
All right. Well, how did they do in the cup, having gotten there?
Well, they were, I guess, in one of the most interesting groups in that World Cup. They were in a group with Spain and Germany and Japan. It started ominously with a heavy 7-0 defeat to Spain, a real thumping. They then beat Japan, who would actually go on to win the group, Japan beating the 2 European teams, but losing to Costa Rica. And then Costa Rica gave Germany a bit of a fright in the final group game, but lost 4-2. So where they ended up was with 1 win against group winners Japan and 2 losses, and that put them bottom with 3 points. But actually, for a moment, I believe, against Germany, had they won that game, they would have gone through. So actually had a fighting chance despite that 7-0 defeat. But as it was, they finished bottom of the group. It was a very competitive group.
Yeah, a pretty exciting group that was. And yes, last place finish, but competitive there. Let's move on to the Gold Cup in 2023, the most recent edition of that tournament.
Yeah, so qualification was through the 2022-23 Nations League, where they competed in Group A. Costa Rica beat Martinique twice, but lost twice to Panama. The Costa Rica-Panama games have been a bit of a theme and perhaps a bit of a litmus test for their strength in the region. Panama, we mentioned, probably the strongest team in Central America now. They beat them twice there. But nevertheless, Costa Rica's 2nd place finish was an automatic qualifying spot.
Yeah, Panama getting the better of them all of the time recently, including actually in the first game of this tournament.
That's right. The opener in the 2023 Gold Cup, they met Panama again and were again defeated 2-1. They then tied El Salvador before winning a crazy 6-4 game against Martinique. They finished second in the group and advanced to the quarterfinal, where they met Mexico, who they meet again here. Mexico won that game 2-0.
Yeah, so another quarterfinal finish for El Ticos. Or is it Los Ticos?
Los Ticos.
Los Ticos. We go to the 2024 Copa America. They did make it to that tournament.
Yeah, they had to play a 2023-24 Nations League quarterfinal against, do you have a guess?
Would it be Panama?
It was. And the result, if you wanted to guess, was 2 wins for Panama. Panama really having the better of their neighbors. So Costa Rica lost that, but they went into a further playoff round. That was a one-off match against Honduras, which they won 3-1. So they did get to compete in the prestigious Copa America.
Yes, they did.
Yeah,
sorry, I'll just add, this is really the first trial of the new squad. It's not as cut and dry as I'm making it here, but a lot of new players kind of starting here, and a few big players now off the squad.
Well, they started very well. They met the mighty Brazil, but tied them 0-0. A good start to the tournament. They then lost to Colombia 3-0 before beating Paraguay in their final match. So they finished ahead of Paraguay with 4 points. That was 3rd out of 4 in the group, so they did not advance, but competitive.
Yes, more competitive than probably would have been expected. We saw Mexico had Venezuela and Ecuador. These guys had a real task against Brazil and Colombia, and Paraguay is not that bad either. So I think they did well considering.
Absolutely.
All right. The next thing we move on to is the most recent Nations League. That's the 2024-25 season.
Yeah, so unlike Mexico, they had to participate in a group stage. They were in a 6-team group, but played only 4 games. However, they had 2 wins and 2 ties, so they topped the group. That put them in a quarterfinal matchup against Panama. They lost to Panama, but then did manage a tie in Panama 2-2. So they ended up losing in the quarterfinals, but they got a point. They didn't lose.
Well, a bit of a Pyrrhic victory, but it was a tie away. So I guess they can thump their chests a little bit about that. But Panama really a nemesis to them nowadays. Let's finish with qualifying for this Gold Cup.
Yeah, and we did kind of cover it because it was through the Nations League. We mentioned they finished top of their 6-team group, so that qualified them for the Gold Cup.
Oh no, it didn't. They still had to. The quarterfinals was actually the qualification.
Oh, correct. Which they lost to Panama, so that moved them on to a further round. That was a home and away against Belize, but they had no trouble. They won 13-1 on aggregate.
Yeah, a pretty interesting, a pretty intricate qualification system there for North America. I was surprised actually at how fair it ended up being, but it was quite odd with Costa Rica winning their group, but actually having to go through a playoff, and the League B team winners qualified automatically for the Cup. But as you can see here, Costa Rica had a fairly easy playoff to see them through.
Yeah.
All right, that is it for Costa Rica. And now we move on to Suriname. And we begin with just a broad overview of their participation and strength. I know the graphics are a little tough to see, but basically, if you look at colors, you're seeing mostly red here.
All right, so as we mentioned at the start, Suriname is a much older team than many would guess. They played their first international in 1915. As Dutch Guyana, they entered the World Cup in 1938, but they did not complete the qualification, and then only joined in earnest in 1962, from which time they participated consistently, apart from missing in 1990. They became Suriname in 1975. They joined regional competition comparatively late, completing their first qualification in 1973. Since then, they withdrew in 1989, 93, and 2003, the latter being the only time qualification was not tied to the local cups. Success in the Caribbean Cup otherwise being their passage to the Gold Cup until the development of the Nations League in 2019 kind of changed the overall qualifying structure.
Yeah, which actually seemed to be a good thing for Suriname. It's turning out.
In terms of achievement, they've never reached the World Cup. In 1978, they reached the final round of qualifying, and in 2010, the semifinal round. They reached the regional finals 3 times in 1977, 1985, and 2021. And they also came close in 2019 when the Cup expanded. They rarely qualified for Caribbean Cups, but 4th place in 1994 and 1996 are their best results. And as you mentioned, they've done a bit better in Nations League play, generally remaining in League A.
Right, and we will take a closer look at the Caribbean Cup and Nations League play, because really they don't come close to the World Cup, and they haven't reached many regional cups. We'll take a look at their regional cup history as well, but I think the smaller cups are a better way of kind of gauging them. But let's take a closer look at how they've done in the World Cup qualifications.
Yeah, so kind of like you said, they've never come close to reaching the World Cup. They went out at the first step in their first 4 qualification runs until 1974, though only twice after that, in 1982 and 2022. But most of those were group stages, and in half of them, including 2022, they did well in the group, but only the top team advanced. Their most successful result was reaching the final round in 1978, but they lost all 5 games once there. 2010 was their next most successful result, the semifinal round, but they managed only draws in their 2 games with Haiti and finished behind them.
Right, so pretty far from reaching the World Cup all in all. Let's look at the regional history of the CONCACAF region.
Sure, do you want to take us through those?
Oh yeah, sure. So despite not completing qualification for 2 of the 6 CONCACAF championships from their first entry in 1971, the early part was a strong period for them. They came close to qualifying in 2 editions and did qualify in 1977 and 1985, although they earned only a single draw over their 9 games in the tournaments. That is much better than their Gold Cup record, where it took until 2021 and an expanded tournament for them to qualify. They had come close in the previous edition in 2019, but otherwise only had come close in 1998. And then the qualifying procedure from 1991 to 2017 was the Caribbean Cup. So we'll take a look at the Caribbean Cup in an overview. Do you want to take that, or do you want me to continue?
Sure, I'll do this one.
Right.
Suriname often came close to qualifying for the Caribbean Cup, including in 3 of the last 4 editions, but they managed only 4 appearances over the 19 editions. That included 2 4th-place finishes in 1994 and 1996, but that actually sandwiched a poor campaign in 1995. Neither of these, though, earned them qualification for the Gold Cup. They otherwise were knocked out at the group stage in 1992 and 2001, and their latter was the last appearance in the finals until the tournament was disbanded in 2017.
Yeah, so are you surprised by that, Connor? Would you have expected a bit of a stronger Caribbean Cup record from Suriname?
I would have, I guess, given their long history, their association, I guess, with a lot of Dutch players, and also, I guess, perhaps a bit more success recently. I know they're small population-wise, but, the Caribbean is, I think there's room, to get in a good period and kind of do well. So the fact that they don't have kind of a really great period in the Caribbean Cup is a little surprising.
Yeah, I am too. A little bit better, as we've been saying, in the Nations League. Do you want to do that one or me?
I'll let you take this one.
All right, so the CONCACAF Nations League took over as the qualifying tournament for the Gold Cup in 2019, and also the Gold Cup tournament expanded to 16 teams that same year. So in the placement round, the 2018-19 Nations League placement round, they finished 12th of 34 and were placed into League B. I think it was the top 10 that made it into League A. So Suriname won that group, and in the next season they were promoted to League A, and they've done well to remain there since. Ironically, though, it was their only season in League B that got them to their first Gold Cup in 2021. But now they've reached it again in 2025, of course.
Yeah, I think that's, remaining in League A is pretty impressive. I know League A has changed in structure, but certainly coming from the Caribbean, a lot of the League A teams are the big kind of continental teams. So, it's pretty impressive, I would say.
Yeah, you're right, and that's a good point. Generally, the Caribbean teams have been behind the Central American teams. So, if you'd have asked me, I wouldn't have guessed that Suriname has been in League A for 4 of the 5 seasons there. All right, so that's the view of their kind of longer history. Let's take a look at their recent history, beginning with their 2022 World Cup campaign.
Yeah, so they began in round 1, and this was a 5-team group, and only the top team advanced. Canada was the group winner, who Suriname lost to, but they won their other 3 games against Cayman Islands, Aruba, and Bermuda. So they finished best of the rest, second out of the 5-team group.
Yes, so only Canada advancing there. That was a pretty short World Cup campaign. Let's look at the Gold Cup 2023 campaign, actually the one they didn't make it to.
Yeah, so qualifying was through Nations League A. They were placed with Mexico and Jamaica. They did tie Jamaica in their opener, but they lost the rest. That third place or bottom finish still put them into a qualifier where they played Puerto Rico. And that game was 0-0 and was decided by a penalty shootout, which Puerto Rico won.
Right, Puerto Rico, I think, coming from League C, but taking them by surprise in the playoff there. So a bit disappointing for Suriname in 2023. They were eligible, of course, as were all teams in CONCACAF for the Copa America 2024. How did that campaign go?
Yeah, so this was a 6-team group again where they played 4 games. And they finished third. That was a win, 2 draws, and a loss. Their defeat was against Cuba, so a bit maybe disappointing, though they were on the road. So third out of 6 was not enough to move on to the next qualifying round.
Right, they would have had to reach the quarterfinals to carry on. So their tournament or their hopes of reaching the Copa America ended there in the group stage. And then the last thing we look at is the most recent Nations League. It's not the last thing we look at, but the most recent Nations League campaign 2024-25.
Yeah, so the structure changed a bit. League A became a 6-team group. And there Suriname finished second behind Costa Rica. They did meet Costa Rica, who they tied 1-1 at home. Then they won 2 and lost 1. So second in the group out of 6, having played their 4 games there.
Yeah, a tremendous result for them. They're really Guatemala, Martinique, and Guadeloupe, all fairly regular qualifiers for the Gold Cup there. So they came out on top. Good for them.
Yeah, very good, actually. Yeah, Guatemala, Martinique, Guadeloupe. Teams probably that historically would have beaten Suriname.
Yeah. Okay, that took them to a quarterfinal. How did they do there?
There they met the mighty Canada, and they did themselves no shame. They lost 1-0 at home and then 3-0 in Canada. That was, I guess, the Nations League quarterfinals. But really, that was the last 8 in North America. So great for them to be there, and great for them that they qualified for this tournament.
Yeah, excellent. That quarterfinal actually moved them on to a playoff, so maybe we can jump through the Nations League and the quarterfinal that we just covered and go directly to the playoff then for this tournament.
Yeah, that loss to Canada set up a playoff against Martinique, and Suriname actually won both legs 1-0, home and away. So that's pretty good. Always difficult to win away, and that put them in this tournament.
Yeah, Suriname is looking pretty good in CONCACAF recently, and let's see how they did. I think we're doing the we're not doing the 2026 World Cup qualifying campaign. That has begun, and I should have prepared it, but I didn't. Anyway, just 2 games played in that group so far. But we are done with Suriname, and we move on to Dominican Republic, and we'll begin with a broad overview of their participation and strength.
So Dominican Republic first entered the competition in 1977. But after one go in both the World and Regional Cups, they disappeared until 1991. They've never missed a World Cup qualification since 1994, sorry. But Caribbean Cup participation was patchy, as they missed in 92, 97, and then failed to complete 3 campaigns from 2005 to 2009. They have consistently participated in the CONCACAF Nations League from its start in 2019. In terms of achievement, they've never reached the semifinal round, or even being the second last round of World Cup qualifying. They also never reached a regional tournament until this year. Both of those competitions were historically well out of their reach. Such teams are best gauged at the local level then, namely the Caribbean Cup from 1991 and then the CONCACAF Nations League since 2019. Their highest achievement in the Caribbean Cup was 2 successful qualifications. They were knocked out at the group stage in both. And in the CONCACAF Nations League, their recent promotion to League A is their best result. From 1991 to 2017, the more local Caribbean Cup was the qualifying tournament for the Gold Cup and the best guide to their strength. They reached only 2 of the 19 tournaments there, though. That was in 1991 and 2012. And as I mentioned, they fell at the group stage in both. They have done better in the CONCACAF Nations League, starting in League B following the 2018-19 placement round and remaining at that level until earning a promotion to League A in 2024-25.
All right, that is great. An overview of Dominican Republic. So reaching their first real tournament here. Haven't reached a World Cup, but let's take a little look at their road to World Cups in a bit more detail.
So yeah, they usually make it past the first preliminary match over a weaker team, although they were embarrassed by the weak Puerto Rico in 1994 and again in 2010, though their neighbors Puerto Rico had improved by that point. Their best showing was in 1998 when they reached the third preliminary stage, but they lost to Trinidad and Tobago that year and for the following 2 World Cups. 2014 offered their first group stage in round 2, and they performed well, finishing above Suriname actually, but far behind the advancing El Salvador. That and 2022 were respectable performances, but 2018 was a disappointing knockout at the hands of Belize.
Ooh. All right, let's take a look now at the tournament history. Again, not really a team that reaches the Regional Cup until this time, but how have they done?
So they've, never come close to reaching the Gold Cup. Until 2017, qualification was based on their Caribbean Cup play and is now currently based on CONCACAF Nations League play. So why don't you talk about both of those?
Yeah, we'll jump right to those because they've never reached a cup. So the Caribbean Cup, actually, kind of like Suriname, Dominican Republic did poorly in the Caribbean Cup. Over the 19 editions, they successfully qualified only twice, in 1991 and in 2012. And on top of that, they were knocked out at the group stage both times. Otherwise, they had come close to qualifying 3 times, once in 1993, and then in each of the last 2 editions. So we do kind of see slow improvement for Dominican Republic over time. But just two successful qualifications for the Cup there. How about their Nations League?
Sure. So in the 2018-19 placement round, Dominican Republic finished 16th of 24 and were placed into League B. They finished 2nd or 3rd over the following campaigns, so they remained in League B, never seriously threatening to win the group nor in any great danger of relegation. But blessed with an easy group in 2024-25, Bermuda being the next strongest competition compared to El Salvador, Guatemala, and Nicaragua in previous seasons, they won the group and earned a promotion into League A.
All right, and as we said, the winners of the Group B advanced automatically to the Cup. And so here they are. Let's take a look at their recent history, beginning with their 2022 World Cup qualifying campaign.
Yeah, so they started in a 5-team group. They came in as the pot 2 team, and I guess fared a little bit worse. They did finish 2nd, well behind Panama, who had a perfect record. But they did tie Barbados at home. The other teams that they beat there were Dominica and Anguilla.
That's right, but knocked out in round 1 of 3 there. So on to the Gold Cup in 2023. That was based on their performance in 2022-23 Nations League B there.
Yeah, and this was, I guess, a bit of a disappointing campaign. They managed to beat Belize twice, but then they didn't win any of the other games. They lost out to Guatemala and then French Guiana. So they finished 3rd, and that ended their campaign there.
Right, so bested by the 2 teams above. And as we see, that's pretty typical, where they're not really challenging the leaders, but not really in danger of relegation there. The next would be their 2024 Copa America run. That was based on 2023-24 Nations League. Again, they were in League B here.
Yeah, so only, I guess, 1 spot moved on. And typical for them, they were well behind Nicaragua, who they did actually tie on the road, but then finished above Montserrat and Barbados.
Yeah, that's right. So again, right in the middle there of that campaign as well. However, a bit better in the Nations League 2024 campaign, 2024-25 campaign, even if it was against easier competition.
Yeah, like you said, no real giant. They were teamed up with Bermuda, Dominica, and then Antigua and Barbuda. And Dominican Republic actually went a perfect 6 for 6. They won all of their games and finished with a maximum of 18 points.
Yeah, so certainly were convincing in the campaign. A ghastly performance by Antigua and Barbuda, who I think were either the 1st or 2nd seed in that group.
Wow, and they finished with a single point.
Yeah. All right, and finally we look at World Cup 2025 qualifying. That's Gold Cup 2025, so qualifying for this campaign.
And that was based on the Nations League we just covered. And by virtue of winning League B, which they did, they qualified automatically for the Gold Cup.
Right, so a bit of an odd format there. League B team qualifying automatically, while some League A teams had to qualify through a further playoff.
Yeah,
there. And I do actually have the results for 2026 World Cup qualifying. So they've had a pretty tough group for this. It has Jamaica and Guatemala there. So they lost their first game in Jamaica, just a 1-0 loss, so a respectable scoreline. That is refereed by Canada's most famous ref. Do you know who that is, Connor?
Not off the top of my head.
I just embarrassed you. Sorry. Drew Fisher. Have you heard the name?
I have actually heard the name.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm off topic. The second game was against British Virgin Islands, so a fairly easy win there. So they currently sit third out of 5 in the group, and the top 2 will advance. So they're in pretty tough for World Cup qualifying there. And that's it for our look at the 4 teams. Let's move on to this is actually should be part 2, our comparison of the teams. And we begin with their pots and rankings.
Yeah, so Mexico were the pot 1 team. They come in as a top ranked team in the region. We mentioned that they hold both the Gold Cup and Nation League crowns at this point, so no surprise there. Costa Rica was a pot 2 team, and they were the highest ranked of the pot 2 teams. That puts them 5th overall in CONCACAF, which is, we said, kind of where they end up at this point. For the pot 3 team, Suriname was the weakest of the pot 3 teams, behind Guatemala, Trinidad, and El Salvador. And Dominican Republic actually come in as the lowest ranked team in the tournament, but no surprise, as this is their very first event.
Right, so I think these are based on CONCACAF rankings rather than FIFA rankings. And, my analysis of that would then be a big divide between the top 2 teams who are at the top of their group and the bottom 2 teams who are at or near, or as you said, right at the bottom of their group. Right?
Yes, yeah. Mexico and Costa Rica from the top of their pot, Suriname and Dominican Republic from the bottom.
Right, pot is the word I should have used there. So we will see Mexico. Suriname ranked 12th in the CONCACAF region right now, Dominican Republic 19th. So by that reckoning, they were kind of lucky to get into the tournament if we think the top 16 should make it. Let's look at the FIFA and the ELO rankings.
Sure. So starting with Mexico, they are 17th in FIFA and 23rd in ELO. Costa Rica are 54th in FIFA and 51st in the ELO ranking. So again, a lot of consistency there. Suriname are 137th in FIFA, but quite a bit higher in ELO, 103rd. We've mentioned their kind of good form recently. And then Dominican Republic are 139th in FIFA and 138th in ELO. So I guess what we should say is that the FIFA rankings have both Suriname and Dominican Republic separated by just 2 rankings or 2 spots. But in ELO, the divide is greater. It's 35 places. So we can talk about that.
Yes, we can, whether we see them as close as that or a pretty big divide as ELO sees it. Before we do get into that discussion, let's look at the head-to-head records, beginning with Mexico and Costa Rica.
Yes, so they've met a number of times, as you'd expect. Mexico has a better record with 17 wins, 8 draws, and 4 wins for Costa Rica.
Yeah, and in recent times, it's been a long time really since Costa Rica won a game. It was 2014 World Cup qualifying, that great campaign by Costa Rica, but that was the last time they beat Mexico. They tied them, as we saw in 2022 World Cup qualifying, but Mexico far superior according to the head-to-heads. Okay, let's move on to the next one.
Yeah, Mexico, Suriname, they've met 3 times. It's 3 wins for Mexico.
That's right. So one of those meetings was a long time ago, probably doesn't matter. But the other 2 were recently in 2023 Gold Cup qualifying, or actually Nations League. And we saw Mexico won both of those legs recently. On we go.
Yeah, and Mexico versus Dominican Republic, they have no competitive record. So I guess the optimistic view is Dominican Republic have never lost a competitive game to Mexico.
Nicely put. Yeah, we sometimes actually get complaints about this, like, oh, they met in 1954, and but we're only looking. We don't consider friendlies in this one. We only look at kind of the competitive games that we cover in qualifying and tournaments. So they've never met as far as that goes. On we go.
Costa Rica versus Suriname. Costa Rica has won 5. They've tied once. And Suriname has no wins against Costa Rica.
Right, but that tie was their most recent meeting. It was in the 2024-25 Nations League campaign. They tied in Suriname there, so maybe that gives them a bit of hope going into the Cup. And finally, no, not finally, second last.
Costa Rica and Dominican Republic, they've also never met in the competitive fixtures that we were talking about.
Right, and now finally.
Dominican Republic and Suriname, they have just one meeting. That was a, well, I'll let you talk about it, but it was a win and a draw for Dominican Republic.
Right, and that was in 2014 World Cup qualifying. So Dominican Republic having, looking favorable to challenge Suriname by that reckoning. Well, at this point, we usually look at the odds. I've been looking for the odds to win group, and you would think there'd be lots of opportunity to gamble on this, Connor. We're not gamblers, but I do like looking at the odds. But it's blank.
Yeah, nothing yet. Maybe closer to the tournament, we'll see that. So you have to go off our own knowledge.
Well, maybe it's not a bad place to begin because we will be looking at the teams comparatively. I don't know whether I'll challenge you to actually put numbers on here, but maybe you can start the discussion into the relative strength of these teams.
Yeah, well, I think, and no surprise, Mexico is the number one team in CONCACAF right now. They've got a couple trophies in their trophy case from recent tournaments, so I think their odds of winning the group are very high. In past years, we might have said Costa Rica could challenge them, and they might still at the game level, but overall, I think Mexico's odds to win the group would have to be quite high. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, Costa Rica may be a bit of an unknown with the new players that are coming on board. We saw that they tied Brazil in the opener of the Copa America. But yeah, I think you'd be a brave man to actually predict Costa Rica to take something off of Mexico here.
Yeah, the draw against Brazil certainly, and that was fairly recently, certainly shows that they're capable against good teams. So it's no disrespect to them. You just think overall Mexico have the pedigree in this tournament.
Yeah, I think so. Mind you, I gotta say that when looking at the Players podcast, I don't really feel Mexico is as strong as they used to be. Maybe particularly in terms of bench strength, because in the past they were able to field an A and a B team, and every summer some summers they sometimes had two teams on the go. I don't really feel they have that kind of depth anymore. Do you have any thoughts about kind of the squad?
You would probably have better insight into the squad. I mean, I think they still have great players to call on. I mean, we talked about Raul Jimenez kind of coming in for the Nations League games and being the difference maker in both the semifinals and finals. So they still have good players, and whether they all are at this tournament or not remains to be seen, but they can field a very strong 11 for sure, and probably have a depth to not be they're not dependent, I would say, on one player, even though Jimenez has been a difference maker recently.
Yeah, definitely. Do you see any chance for Suriname or Dominican Republic challenging these top two? We talked about a bit of a gulf between the top and bottom two.
I think that's where the gulf is. I mean, Costa Rica, we talked about being a little bit of an unknown, and I still view that. They on a good, with a good performance, they may take some points off Mexico, but if they go the other way and are bad, I think it's possible that they slip up. I mean, they did tie Suriname in their most recent meeting. So yeah, maybe not. It's not an impossible gulf, but I think it would be unlikely that Suriname or Dominican Republic overtake Costa Rica for second.
Right. Of course, there is a chance of one of them finishing in. Hang on, is that right, or is it the top four team? Just the top two making it.
Just the top two.
You're right, because it's 16 teams. So yes, they definitely have to upset to advance there. Let's talk a bit about between Suriname and Dominican Republic. We saw a couple of indications that it might be close, but also a couple of indications that Suriname is the stronger team. What do you think?
I do think Suriname are the stronger team, and I think the main thing for me is they've done it for a bit longer. They qualified for the Gold Cup in 2021. They've been a Nations League A team for several years. Dominican Republic are just kind of coming into that. They have kind of a good Nations League campaign that qualified for them this tournament, but it's a kind of a smaller sample size to go off. And I think Dominican Republic, this is their first ever tournament. You think part of them, they have to just be happy to be here, whereas Suriname have gone through the experience now of being here recently, and I think would like to have ambitions to make a little bit more of a mark.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of Caribbean teams have been kind of scraping the files of their kind of colonizing countries. In this case, Suriname, kind of looking to Netherlands and really finding better and better players over the last few years, as a few of them have, Curacao and so on. And I agree with you that Suriname have been getting better and for longer than Dominican Republic. I think Dominican Republic has some association with Spain, but they're not getting kind of Spanish players who didn't make the Spanish team coming onto their squad like we do see for some other Caribbean teams.
Yeah, they are. I mean, we looked at population right at the start with 11.5 million people. They're bigger than a lot of Caribbean teams they're facing. Do you think that Dominican Republic could be a team that comes into a bit of a force in the region, perhaps like Suriname are doing now?
I wonder if there's a bit of a shift, because we've seen Puerto Rico getting stronger and Dominican Republic, and both of those are kind of countries that have focused on baseball, but both of them I think have been getting better in soccer too, and really both of those teams should be a little bit better than they are. So I think Dominican Republic is generally getting a bit stronger in the region. They're ranked 19th, I think we saw in the CONCACAF rankings. They were ranked a bit higher in ELO. I'm just looking at their regional ranking in ELO. It's 15th in FIFA and 17th in CONCACAF. So they kind of deserve to be here on that basis. However, that compared to Suriname being 11th in FIFA and 14th in ELO, I think they have an uphill battle. I think they've done well to make it, but I'd be surprised if Dominican Republic overcame Suriname here.
Yeah. Do you think they go home without a point, or do you think they manage to take a point from somewhere?
I think it's very possible they could go home without a point, but you really never know what can happen in these tournaments. I mean, maybe that it doesn't quite lead us into our next consideration, but there is talk of whether Mexico and maybe Costa Rica to a degree, but especially Mexico, will send their best players. So but even again, with a weakened squad, I don't think Dominican Republic, it would be a surprise if they got a point, especially off the big teams.
Yeah.
That is a question, though. Do you think Mexico will be sending their best?
The calendar is so packed, and even there's some Mexican teams competing in the Club World Cup, a number of them. And they just don't really get a summer off. So it's tough to say. They've maybe want to build on success on the Gold Cup and Nations League. It's just really their last major tournament, though, before co-hosting a World Cup. So I think the motivation would be there. It's just whether they choose to kind of rest some players or whether they choose to kind of go full force.
Okay, let's say Mexico does send a B team. Do you see Costa Rica challenging them in that case?
I think they could, but I still probably wouldn't predict it. I think Mexico should have enough, and They usually do well in the group stage. It's maybe later on where they may run into trouble. So yeah, I mean they met last time in the quarterfinals. Mexico won 2-0. I'd probably expect a similar type of result here, even with the B team.
Yeah, I was going to say so. Even with the B team, we don't really know what Costa Rica is going to put out. Finally, how far do you see these teams going? Mexico winning again?
Yeah, I mean, I think they've looked stronger than the United States recently. They've been challenged by Panama quite a bit, so they're not a clear step ahead of everyone. And Canada hopefully can have a good showing too. So, I mean, they'll want to win it. They've won the last 2 editions, I believe. So, kind of anything less than that, I guess, is somewhat of a failure. So, I'm not sure they'll do it again. In the Gold Cup, there's kind of been this switching back and forth between USA and Mexico. So it's kind of USA's turn, you could say, or perhaps another team's turn.
I would actually say that, if Canada and Panama kind of put their best foot forward here, and if Mexico and USA do send a B team, it could be a great opportunity for those countries to do well.
I don't think Mexico is at their strongest point, which means I think there is a team like a Panama, maybe a Jamaica, could be Canada that knocks them out, but they'll be strong favorites, perhaps the favorites to win the tournament.
Yeah, and their fans demand nothing less, as we said. Great. Okay, I think that brings us to the end, unless you have any closing comment.
I'll just say that for Costa Rica, their quarterfinal finish has become kind of their 2-year tradition, and probably where they're going to be again, but it would be good for a new crop of players to try and go one further.
Well, who knows? They can take us by surprise, as they did in the 2014 World Cup and in that tie against Brazil. So you never really know what to expect with Costa Rica. And who knows, Connor, we may end up being completely wrong and see Dominican Republic thrash everyone in the group.
Well, it would make for an exciting group, indeed.
Great. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of our look at Group A, and we will see you next time for Group B.
All right. See you then.
We would like to thank Future Bass for the wonderful music you hear in this podcast. The title is called Alone.